Welcome to your iconic image. If you want to take control of your image and be a power player in your space, then this is the show for you. Here we will arm you with tools and information to help you grow your brand on purpose. I'm your host, Marlana Semenza, photographer and visual strategist. Now let's dive into today's episode. Carrie Veatch is a coach who uses neuroscience and mindset work to help ambitious female entrepreneurs bust through self-doubt and false narratives to create a six-figure and multiple six-figure online businesses and the lives they truly want. Welcome, Carrie.
Thank you so much for having me.
So talk to us about this. You know, we're out there, we're grinding, we're doing our thing. Why is it that we don't have what we truly want yet? Is it just we need to work harder?
Absolutely not, which is not what most people want to hear. Because honestly, it's so much of the conditioning that we have been fed, and it's just how we are taught and trained to live our lives, right? Like the harder you work, the more money you make. And yet we all know examples of people where that is not true, right? Like where that's definitely not the case for them. So I am such a believer in unlearning and relearning so that we can easily get what we want. And I'm excited to talk about this.
So what do we have to unlearn?
A lot. Honestly, the majority of it is unlearning. Like relearning isn't as hard. It's unlearning, but it's the narratives, it's the thoughts that say you can't have what you want. You have to work hard to get what you want. And pretty much anything that reminds you or tells you that you're not good enough, that you are not deserving of it. Like all of us have that show up at some point in our existence, whether it's through family or school or, well-intentioned people that have also been conditioned to think that way. But the thing is we're born worthy. Like I really, really believe that we have these desires and we're worthy just because we're alive. Like there's nothing you have to do to be worthy.
Do you see this show up more in women than men?
Yes.
Why do you think that is?
I think a lot of it, especially, if we relate it to business, particularly, men just don't take things as personally. They have a very clear way of separating out like, oh, it's business, right? And we joke all the time, but men just, that's very much how they view things. And they say that often, like, oh, it's just business. Mm-hmm. And so we as women often take things on, we take things personally. We have the ability to hold a lot. Like we're big feeling people, right? We have more emotions generally. And we have a different way of operating than men. So oftentimes we are conditioned to think that men are the ones who make the money. And our role, it's not been that long ago, right? Where women's role was at home. Like that was their role.
Right. So what about fear? Because I know women tend to have a lot of fears, not that men don't, but I think our fears play out more often, perhaps. Mm-hmm. So what part does fear play in us holding us back?
I think a huge part. I think that our narratives, whatever they might be, are the biggest driver of whether or not we go after the things that we want, because this is why I work with so many women on beliefs first, and why it's so essential that we change the dialogue in between our ears. And, it's like, I use this example all the time, but it's the Roger Bannister example of no one ran a 4-minute mile until he did. And everyone else believed it was possible. But up until that point, we had no basis for believing that someone could even do that. And so this is where we just have these limitations in our mind. Sometimes it's very real, quote unquote, in terms of past experience or things we've tried that haven't worked out the way we've wanted them to. So then we start to create these stories and have these beliefs that say, I'm not worthy of that. I can't do that. I'm afraid of that. It's possible for her, not me, And so, but the thing is like fear and excitement are basically two sides of the same coin. Like they're just different sides of the same coin. And so when we can flip that and we understand that our body has the same response to them, it's just how we're choosing to view it. Like that to me is how we easily can flip the fear and turn it into more of the excitement, and then work through that, that it doesn't feel as scary as like, oh my gosh, I have to go into flight mode right now because I'm afraid. Like I can actually calm my nervous system and I can work through this and tell different stories, and then literally send breath to my body, to the places in me that feel unsafe, and soothe those parts of ourselves so that we can move through it.
Hmm. So I know you have a whole process. So how do we start to rewrite this narrative for ourselves?
So first step for me always, in like whatever you want to call it, whether it's like manifesting something or getting what you want, you know, everyone has different words. It's kind of all the same, right? But we just have different languaging around it. But the first thing to me is always deciding what you want, like getting really clear on what you want. And, you know, a lot of people will say, oh, but I don't know what I want. And I think that that's a little bit true, but usually when we do some digging and some uncovering, it comes back to the fear. Like most people do actually know what they want, just think they can't have it. So they don't want to own that that's what they want.
Hmm. Interesting.
Right.
Right. So, okay. So let's say now we've identified it. How do we start to go after it, really go after it?
Yeah. So to me, the process is honestly quite simple, but then the work around it can be really challenging because we have to unlearn all this stuff, right? But it's deciding what we want. And then we've got this clear picture. And then our work is to, I always say, like clean up our thoughts or our energy behind everything that says you can't have it. So it's like proving to yourself those thoughts are wrong. So even just like a simple process that I like to do is whether you do journaling or you can do this in an audio version, but literally write down all of the thoughts or record all of the thoughts that are coming up that say it's impossible, you can't have this, there's no way, like whatever version of that is coming up for you, and look at them. Sometimes we're really afraid to look at them because we feel like, oh, well, if I name them, then they must be true. Whereas I'm like, you can't shift and change anything if you're not acknowledging it, because then it's just going to be living in your subconscious and it's going to be driving the show.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to look at it. And then the work is to basically disprove it. So you want to find a different thought, like a more empowering version of that. And whether that means just deciding what that could be, or sometimes it's finding a piece of evidence in somebody else who has done it, right? Which I think is the coolest part of the internet. Like you can literally find someone who's done the thing that you want to do.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really starting to rewrite those narratives in that way, and having that evidence for your brain and the new thoughts and narratives to show you that you can go have the thing, get the thing. But then the work becomes like really detaching from every single detail of how, because what we want to do, right, is be like, okay, well, maybe it's possible, but I need to know the 9 steps between here and there,
Mm-hmm.
which is very human nature. But then we're staying in our cognitive brain and we're just overanalyzing everything. Where I see the magic happening in so many people of when we can get into that place of trust and faith. And like the easiest way I like to explain it is just having this belief that it's done. Like, I don't know if it's happening tomorrow or next week, but I trust and believe it's done. It's already decided because I put my mind on it. I decided. And so I'm going to have that level of faith that if it shows up next week or next month, it doesn't matter.
So what I'm hearing in there, and correct me if this is not right, is, for example, let's say I want to be a 6-figure earner, and currently I'm not. And I think, okay, I work through my limiting beliefs. Is it conducting myself as that 6-figure earner as I'm working through it? Is that what will help me along the way?
Absolutely. So I think a lot of people will say like, oh, fake it till you make it. And I don't believe in that type
Mhm.
of mentality because I don't think that you can get there feeling good about yourself. I think you're just
Right.
going to feel like a fraud the whole time if you do that. But what I do know to believe, like what I do know to be true is that you have to act out of that higher version of yourself. So
Hmm.
the example right here that you're saying, like, absolutely, you, of course, you can come to me and say, I want to be a six-figure, earner, but I've never done that before. I have no idea what that would feel like or what that would look like. But then it's to tap into your imagination. Like, what do you imagine you would feel like? What do you imagine would be going on in your day-to-day experience? And then we tap into that place and you make decisions and actions out of there.
Mm.
Because otherwise, we stay in the same level of thinking and the same patterns that got us where we are right now.
Hmm. What if we have a dream to do something and you're saying look for examples of it in the internet? What if there are none? What if we are that Roger Bannister? Then what? Do things change at all if we may be the first one to do something?
I mean, a little bit, yes and no, right? Because the truth is like we never have the exact blueprint of a person who's done the thing in the same way that we want to or in the same fashion, right? Like we all bring our own unique experience to something. So, as much as I am a fan of like borrowing evidence of other people, you're still having to try that on and figure out how does that work for me and my life. So, I would say like it might be a little bit harder, quote unquote, to trailblaze and to do
Hmm.
something where you have no examples of that. But that's where I just really believe in the power of our minds and the power of imagination. Like kids are magical at this, right?
Hmm.
They do not have the same limitations or the same conditioning that we as adults have. And so, honestly, the work is to go back to being like that, like where you
Hmm.
believed anything was possible in that play state in your mind and creating. And you have to be able to tap into that. And I know a lot of adults say, oh, I can't do that. That's silly or whatever. But like, what do you have to lose?
So true. Also, with women, and we touched on it earlier, we tend to be the more emotional of the sexes. Is that something that we can embrace and use to our advantage, or is that something we need to get a hold on?
I think it's such a gift, right? And I think now, and I am by no means like an expert in all of this, but I love so much of the masculine versus feminine energy and studying that and being around people that teach on that because we are the receivers, right? It's so much easier for us to earn when we're in that receiving state because that's just our gifting naturally.
Hmm.
And so everyone's got a various level of like masculine energy in them. If you're a female or if you're a male, you have a certain level of feminine energy in you, right?
Hmm.
So as much as there's like be in receiver mode and those things, it's all a little bit based on your personality too, right?
Hmm.
But I never ever think having emotions, being a deeply feeling person, any of those things are negatives. Like they're such positives, but you have to know how to use them and you have to know your own patterning in that. Of like where you're getting in your way and stopping yourself and then where it's really helping you.
Mm. What about limiting beliefs as far as money goes? Um, do women struggle more with that? And how do we identify what our limiting belief about money itself might be?
Yeah. I definitely think women do struggle more than men. Of course there's exceptions, but I think in general, yes. And to me, it's just identifying like any of the things and the thoughts that are again in the way, like anything that's coming up for you consistently, like just the basic bare bones, because obviously we don't have enough time to like deep dive into all of
Right.
this, but you know, like I'll work with clients around thoughts and judgments maybe that are showing up. And it's never a thing to judge ourselves for, because this work becomes so much easier when you can just notice and observe what's going on and not judge yourself for it, and like separate out, right, yourself from your thoughts. But if you have really negative thoughts around rich people or people who have more than you or any of those types of things, I just think it's a beautiful invitation to look at what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
Because the truth is like, if you think everyone who has more than you is selfish and greedy and all of these things, you're not going to want to make more money, because
Right.
subconsciously your subconscious is like, no, we're not safe. We can't do that.
Mm-hmm. What about, I know, unfortunately, a lot of times women get into competitions with one another. And we tend to think sometimes, okay, well, if there's a spot for her, then that means there's one less spot for me. So it becomes a competition. How do we shift to an abundance mindset where there's enough for all of us and to be able to cheer each other on along the way?
Yeah. Honestly, so much of it is a choice. A lot of this work, as annoying as it can be, it's really becoming conscious enough to understand we're at choice of what are we choosing to think and believe, and where are we giving our attention to.
Mm-hmm.
So I love the exercise of, let's say you're really struggling with other women and seeing their success, and maybe you're feeling unworthy of it yourself, or, you know, whatever's coming up. I love giving clients the exercise of actively going and cheering on that person that maybe is triggering you. And I just think there's so much magic in that. Like at first, you're going to hate it and it's going to be miserable. But as you do it and as you start to sit in that more, like the feelings dissipate and you start to go, all right, I'm actually not that different than her. And the reason that I'm triggered is because I actually want what she has. Like, it's just the truth.
Yeah. Is there anything that you see that comes up over and over and over again, um, in most people that you work with? Any particular belief or challenge?
Lots of them, but mostly I would honestly say it's around enoughness.
Mm,
Like, especially if you're a mom, especially if you know, have really big ambitions and you're a mom, like that divide of I'm never enough if I'm at home or if I'm at, you know, my job or my business or whatever you're doing, like, or even if you don't have kids, I just think it just comes up the most with females. Like we struggle with feeling enough in what we do.
mm. Is there something that we can start to do today to change that?
So here's my best advice if you are a business owner. And some of this will apply even if you're not, because I think in some ways it still shows up if you have a job in corporate. Like it kind of just looks a little bit different. But the two questions I love to ask that have been so helpful for me, and then how I coach clients, is asking yourself every single day, what do I need? And that's like you as a human being. What do I need? And then what does my business need? And separating those out so that you're really aware of like, oh, this is a business thing. I'm taking this personally, but no, I need to go put this over here. And I'm never saying you don't get to be yourself, because I think you absolutely get to be your full self in your business. That's the whole reason we have businesses. We want to do our own thing. But the truth is, you know, I even had this conversation with a client today. She goes, I would have been fired months ago if I were working for someone else, because she was just finally getting really honest about what she isn't doing in her business. And so I think really separating those out and then having some type of mindfulness practice to remind yourself that you are worthy and enough regardless of anything else, which I know can be the most challenging work. But the
Mhm.
truth is, like, if you never made a dime beyond today, if you never did another thing in your life, like you are worthy as a human being simply because you're alive.
Mm. And I know that you have a journal that helps people kind of start to get into all this. Talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So I have a journal that you can grab for free if you're into a mindset practice yet or not. It can be used at any stage, but really, it's aimed at women and making more money in their businesses. But all these principles really apply. They're the same. Like we love to think they're so different, but they're just the same. And it's really tapping into your power and who you are and what you're capable of. Because the truth is we're afraid of outshining people or being too much or not enough all at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And so I love journaling because it gets to the root of something pretty quickly. And so you can look at what's under the surface because a lot of us aren't even aware of what our patterns are. Like we just don't know. And so we keep coming up against something, or, maybe we're aware that certain circumstantial patterns are happening, but we're not quite aware of what we are playing in that part.
Mm-hmm.
So I just have a bunch of simple journal prompts you can use to get underneath some of the things that are going on. And it's always like, take what works, leave what doesn't, but developing some type of practice so you can get into your fears and looking at them so you can begin to heal them if you need to, go backwards and look over time what has happened, but that you can heal those things and then begin to shift them to more empowering beliefs.
Mm. And I know that we're just scratching the surface on all of this today because it really is a process and it really is something that you need to dig a lot deeper into. So I'll just leave everybody with what you've said so far today and just ask you 4 final questions. And the first one is, what was the best piece of advice you were ever given?
Honestly, I was thinking and I was like, what is the best piece of advice? Here's the top one I will pick today. And that is bet on yourself.
Love that. Share with us one thing on your bucket list. Because I know you've done a lot.
Yeah. I want to see the Northern Lights. It's definitely on my list. I don't care where, but I just want to see them.
As somebody who has seen them, it's quite a sight.
I miss them in Iceland, so I need to see them.
Mm. So when the toy companies finally get around to making an action figure of you, what 2 accessories will it come with?
I don't know how to explain this in accessories, but as a kid and growing up, I have just like I'm very athletic. And so they used to call me Stretch Armstrong. Do you remember the Stretch Armstrong doll? So I was thinking of that and I was like, I don't know what accessories they would be, but I would be a Stretch Armstrong doll. So maybe like something that would come with Stretch.
Love it. And if all of this resonates with people, Carrie, and they want to do more work and reach out to you, how do they find you?
Yeah, I have a website. You can find me at setyourselffreellc.com. You can book a free 30-minute discovery call. I love getting on the phone with people, seeing how I can help you shift to what's going on, to where you want to be, particularly if you do have a business and you want to grow and expand that. And then I also am on Instagram. It's the same handle, setyourselffreellc.com. And I have a Facebook group as well called Set Yourself Free Community. You can come hang out there, do free trainings, all kinds of free stuff in there every week.
Love it. And I will make sure all that stuff gets in the show notes. Thank you so very much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. This was so fun.
Thank you for joining us. Once again, I'm Marlana Semenza, photographer and visual strategist. Please comment, like, or share this episode, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss a thing. For more information on how I can help you create your iconic image, visit marlanasemenza.com.